Hello, everybody. This is Project Alpha in field conditions with some technical issues, and you'll probably hear some errors along the way, sound-wise. And this is Nikolai Feldman, Alexey, Arestovych, and Yuri Romanenko are already online. Good evening, guys. All right. At the beginning of the stream, we announce a new fundraiser. Today, we're doing it for President's Brigade, 3rd Battalion, 2nd Mortar Battery. They're near Urozhaine, and they are looking for some aid in purchasing Starlink generator, some winter shoes, vehicle accumulators, and construction materials. And all that they want to fit into 230,000 hryvnias. So today we're doing the fundraiser for that detachment. Again, this is their account, their card that your money go to, so please chime in if you can. There is a lot of news also to address, and Yuri Romanenko already called his stream announcing what are we going to be doing today. The news number one is that ex-head of NATO, Rasmussen, offered Ukraine to join the alliance without the occupied territories by Russia. This article was published in Guardian. Ex-General Secretary of NATO said that occupation by Russia of several territories of Ukraine will not prevent Ukraine from joining NATO. Whose opinion do you think he's expressing besides his own? Oh, I think, according to some of the screamers here in Ukraine, he probably had sold himself to the Eastern pro-Russian party. And everybody who wants or brings up the topic of Ukraine joining NATO, they're probably all traitors, right? That's how it's often taken in exchange for territories. But let's look at it from a different framework and without sarcasm. A lot of Ukrainians reacted really negatively to my suggestion that we should negotiate because they're sitting in the land of overheated expectations. And I'm being hit by the back end of the pole that I was actually swinging back in the day. So I was one of those who was overheating the expectations. And again, there was a different situation at the moment. We did have a chance to go differently. And one needs to draw a distinction here between an overall setting to win. It is good, it is important, and it needs to remain. I was instilling that starting the February 24th of 22. But one should not mix it with the objective reality. When I was talking back then, when I was sending presidential office message, I saw that Russians cannot win Ukraine by the method they've chosen. So it will be scary for the first 3 days, and after that it will be, okay, we will win that. But Russians now have changed the way they fight. They changed the war they fight. And the only answer for that would be to come back to reality and to face it again. Our setting for victory and our long will to win is not going anywhere. Our long will have to be longer than Russian long will because, and it is not an easy thing to do because their long will is a formed thing on the government level and ours need to get longer. But the way we have chosen is not really helping us to win. As a reminder, there is a gray tanker fleet from 400 to 450 selling Russian oil and gas without any stoppage. Nobody sanctions those vessels. In Central Asia, they're building a Russian military hub. This information hasn't leaked to the open media, but in Central Asia, they're already discussing that with an accent towards the armored vehicles. That Russia is ramping up its technological cooperation with China and North Korea, that their budget for the war is growing. And what are we replacing our strategy with? We are putting the courage and will. Okay, that's good. These are good things. And I'm the first one to support and say that our long will and courage needs to be grander than Russians, Chinese, and all the foes that may attack us. But a belief without being grounded to reality is going to lead you to some bad places. It's almost like if you're pressing the gas pedal in your vehicle and rushing forward, but you need to sometimes slow down and go around the walls and obstacles, right? You won't get to your point without that. And going back to reality, we now have an army that failed to take Tokmak in this summer campaign. And this is the disconnect that we have now. People who really urge for us to win, and people who do not really correlate that with our reality on the front. And I'm trying to pull it back an inch by inch to some reasonable position. As Aristotle said, a human has three sources of inspiration: pathos, ethos, and logos. So pathos is emotions, logos is logic, and ethos is ethics. Logic here is not a popular thing. Ethics, we have issues. And pathos, this is just emotions. And frankly, you won't ride too far on that. West has logos just fine. They calculate things. They see what's going on the Ukrainian battlefield. And during the framework of the last week, there were a lot of statements that are really poorly accepted by our lower grade pathos, because the emotions currently in Ukrainian society are not too high level emotions. So you can maybe suspect that ex-general director of NATO had sold himself somewhere, but you cannot also suspect as well as president of Czech Republic, Peter Paul, who was warning us before summer that this counteroffensive will likely be the last one in this war. You can also attack Macron with his statements, but it's difficult to attack Pavel and his statement because he, besides being a president of Czech Republic, he was the head of a military committee in NATO. And he understands fine that the army that failed to take Tokmak will not be able to take the occupied territories in the next couple years. And politicians on the West who understand reality, they also understand that they cannot change the situation on the front, because in order to do that, they would need to supply 5 or 6 times more the weaponry that they are doing now. So they're coming back to us and saying that, guys, your will to win is fantastic. And Borrell came out today and also did notice that American aid likely will be dwindling, so we as EU need to increase aid to Ukraine in order for it to win. So he's talking in terms of victory, not losing. Macron is talking in the terms of victory, not losing. Germany also wants to increase their military aid twice, and they're already second after the United States. So they're all talking in the terms of victory. A German general recently came out and said that we'll be helping you for the next 10 years. But nobody is talking about easy and light and quick victory. Zaluzhny did talk about exactly that. Russia did change the war we're fighting. We're still fighting the war. And we apparently are still fighting with the war that they brought here on the 24th of February. We've won that war. That kind of war we won. But now they've changed it, and we still are lagging behind in even understanding that the method of waging war right now needs to change. And in this regard, we're starting to slag behind. And such a situation when the West cannot increase their aid for different reasons, the decisions that Russia has already made and decisions that we failed to make on time, it creates the current reality that you cannot really avoid. So will to win is great, no questions here. Now we need to attach some brain to that will and to understand how we can do it and where is it all going. So for now, until we found a way to intensify Western aid or 20 times ramp up our military-industrial complex, and I don't see volunteers to suggest improvements there, we perhaps should start bringing our brains back to reality, our logos back to the actual situation. And once again, what all Ukraine and Ukrainians need to understand is that when we are talking that on this current stage it is impossible, it doesn't mean that we are bending over in front of Moscow or releasing these territories to their use. No, this is just being sober. This is sobriety. If you cannot jump over that wall, you need to walk around it. And that's where our logic is failing us for now. That's where we somehow suspect that changing the strategy is not having the will to fight and the will to win. Well, then bring it up to Zaluzhny as well, because he's expressing exactly the same concern. And you guys need to find something, because otherwise we're in a military scientific stalemate where we cannot really find any tools to win over Russians dramatically. But we are dictating, and we need to keep pushing this narrative that you guys need to come back to your senses, come back to reality. Dear society, we are fighting. You seem to fight the war that nobody's fighting with you anymore. We won in that first war, but now they changed the war they fight, and we need to prepare to fight this long war. This is not a quick story, and many things may happen along the way. And the West is suggesting us a very simple thing. What does it mean when an ex-commander, an ex-president is talking to us? Usually, their voices are used to communicate messages that current politicians want to say but cannot voice yet. So he's coming out and saying, guys, take this offer while it's available, because half a year it will not be available. And there'll be just guarantees without joining NATO. Or maybe a year later, there'll be a conversation about Minsk III without any guarantees at all. So we're being told now directly, this is your last chance, or one before last. And we're still eager to consider you as a NATO member. And we need more sobriety here, again, more logic that if we want to join European Union and NATO, we need to be observing the situation as a team player. Because what we are calling Ukraine-centric is egocentric from outside. And is it good? Is it bad? If you like it, do you not like it? This is how it is. There is nothing pro-Russian in these narratives. There is Czech, French, European, American, and other narratives. We also don't know how American election campaign will end and who will win there. We are being given a ticket into the last train cart, and we're standing there on a platform saying, well, no, it would mean that we will surrender an inch of our expectations, and we'll stay here on a platform. But I was just talking to a friend on the front who was telling me that he's brought to the first line with his tanks, and he's saying, dude, I only have 5 shells in my tank. That's all my complement. And yeah, we do have the will. We'll fight with our shovels if we need to, but I only have 5 shells. Let me chime in here, Alexey. Sure, Yuri. So all this happening, I think, is a matter for us to answer a question: what are our strategic goals in this war? Now we're at the strategic fork, where what I call is a bifurcation point. It usually forces you to make a new decision that can lead you to a qualitatively new scenario, and you cannot come back to that fork in the road. Processes of different level then start. So we're approaching such a point right now when we need to make a decision about our priorities. And this is, of course, not a popular question, which many people avoid to discuss here, but we will post it here. What is the war? What is the war goal for Ukraine? In my opinion, in our opinion, because Alexey is bringing up that same discussion. We've been actually bringing it up last summer when we touched the Korean variant. The goal of Ukraine in this war is guarantees of security. Imagine that Ukraine won and got to the borders of 1991, but has no guarantees from anybody. We are getting to the borders with destroyed economy, with depleted territories, with several million people who are abroad, with angry population that currently reside at Donetsk and Lugansk republics and some in Crimea. And we are at the borders of 1991, and we have no guarantees of security because West, for whatever reason, doesn't want to give it to us. And Russia wants to play it back. So a question. In this situation, the reach of the borders of 1991 is at the end of this conflict? Obviously not, and Ukraine will find itself in a much weaker position than it was on the 24th of February. Because now it has different characteristics, it's depleted, it's tired, economically it's devastated. It's like France after the First World War. France was a winner in the First World War. It found itself in the winning camp, but the positional character of military campaigns they waged, it led France to such a depletion of its male population that it ceased to be a really big world player on the global scale. It got to the United Nations as a Security Council member only as an advance payment from its allies. So nominally it won, but on the grand scale it didn't. The main guarantee, the main goal for Ukraine is the guarantee of security in this war. So Rasmussen is not expressing anything new from what he was saying 2 or 4 years ago. Rasmussen formula implied participation of Ukraine and Georgia in such a process, so he invented that even before this war started on the 24th of February 22. So for us, Rasmussen's formula is basically a magic wand that will work in, let's say, in the case when we have a plan, when we have a system plan to which we're being called by Republicans who are posting in the United States 12 questions, which, again, bring us back to the key matter. The West wanted Ukraine to become a NATO member. Ukraine also wants to become a NATO member. Now, we pose a question, how would Putin react to that? Because today he's in a situation when he's not really winning, but his situation is somewhat leveling. They're rebuilding their resources for a long game. They're signing contracts with Asia, with the East, North Korea, China. And they understand that if they somehow drag the situation to presidential elections with the United States, they might hit some deal with Trump. And there is a high probability that Trump might support a deal in some shape or fashion. But even if he won't go, and if he'll continue to support Ukraine, Russians are still expecting that somebody will crumble. Will Europe crumble? Will states crumble in some capacity? Will Ukraine crumble? Which would be the weakest link? So that's what they're playing. The long will, as Alexey says. If you hit the same spot for 200 years, eventually you'll get your result or some kind of result. And that's what they're playing now. They're hitting at the spot of the weakness of allies, looking for one of them to crumble and to fold. So if we are playing such a game, and if we're starting to look for some acceptable solution together with the West, we need then to take the formula which Republicans suggested and to answer those questions that they highlighted. So, one, what is the goal of the war? What should be the pace of this war? Which resources do you need to follow with the plan? How much it will cost for all of us, for Americans, for Germans, for Ukrainians, etc. And when you get the roadmap of these answers, you have certain metrics. You have KPI metrics that you can use to understand if you're going in the right direction or not. And here we need to post another question. What will be a clear solution, clear situation for the West, which would allow them to concentrate on growing the effectiveness of Ukraine in this war? Basically, would allow Ukraine to reach certain results that would push Russia to be ready for negotiations. So Ukraine will lead Russia to negotiate only when Russia will suffer another defeat. Today is an anniversary of Kherson defeat, right? A year ago, Russian emissaries were flooding Europe with in all directions with the same message: let's negotiate, let's negotiate, let's negotiate. Why did it happen? Because there were two weak moments at the front at this point for Russia. They failed in Kharkov region and they failed down south in Kherson. Ukraine and the West jointly do understand that they need to cause defeat in some capacity on the front for Russia. And this may happen only in one way: if Ukraine gets F-16s and has enough technology to support that F-16 aerial superiority, and maybe in a short term gains air control, maybe in the direction of the main hit. And everybody understands that it's going to be south, that Ukrainian goals in this limited strategic framework to get to the negotiation point is getting to Azov Sea and probably cleaning Russia away from the mouth of Dnieper. Then we have the chain of ports under our control. The mouth of Dnieper, we can move the grain. Crimea is blocked, and Russian access to Crimea by land is cut. And the West will start walking towards the negotiation position with Russia, because it will be West who will be talking to Russia to talk it into negotiations, because Russia would need to feel its might being overrun by the West, and they need to understand, they need to be in a position when they need to negotiate. And Basically, Ukraine needs to liberate the southern territories, cut the roadwork to Crimea, and get to Azov, Sea of Azov, and get the ports back. So they need enough military support, all the F-16s and more tools to achieve this goal. This is the first component, not the last one. Second is what Alexey is saying, sanctions. The West needs to come to agreements internally that for some months they need to really push on the sanctions and on their efficacy to push Russians in a corner. And there are several mechanisms they can do it. We'll be unfolding them in the next streams. What else is available? Which other soft spots Russians have where they can be grabbed for hundreds of billions and they would not be able to evade if you really target that. So a moment where allies would understand that allies need to give us 100 F-16s and not retrain Ukrainian pilots for that, but find volunteers to pilot them. Because we all understand that the window of capability of that opportunity is small. Peter Paul talked about that last summer, and the window is not going to be large. Macron also outlined the frame that the window of opportunity is rather small. So when the West gets this sharp specification, and we work twofold, we work on sanctions and on the military front, that is being supported by the West to allow the superiority in space and to use F-16 hits on the ground targets. That will definitely decrease our losses and will increase Russians. And then we get a chance to get into the negotiation position that Rasmussen and Macron are talking about. And let's imagine that we fail to negotiate with Russia. But in the meantime, the West really invests in this strategy because for them it's understandable. It's explainable from the point of view of sending message to the electors, to your audience there. It has a resource base, it has an actual numbers underneath it. Here is a constructive offer because this is where we want to be. This is how much resources we need to get. This is when we finish the active phase of war. And if Russians decide to not proceed with negotiations in this case, then at least we still get more advantages because we will get additional military help. We very likely will liberate more territories. And in any case, even if the war goes into a long, protracted mode for the next stage, we still have more trump cards to play. But we need to outline that. We need to rationalize this dialogue with the West. So it's not just plan B for us, the borders of 91, and we don't care about the West, where they take resources, what politics they have to deal with internally. No, we need to become more flexible and to operate in the logic that is understandable and that fits their motivation according to the tasks of the presidential campaign in the United States and the situation unfolding in Europe, etc., etc., etc. I'm done with my statement. All right, then let's also say that there is a statement by Stoltenberg, who is an acting head of NATO, who said that we should be ready for the long war. Wars are unpredictable by its nature. We know for sure that what's happening at the negotiations table is closely connected with the situation on the front. Ukraine remains a sovereign and independent state only due to the support of NATO, and Putin is getting more understanding that he cannot win on the battlefront. Alexey, a question to you. In Russia, do you think they have a strategic task to achieve more successes on the battlefront than they have right now? Because the ground access to Crimea is what they wanted, and they announced that since 2014. We knew that they'll be going for it. Well, Nikolai, they have the minimum level of task, and you can see it by their actions. They want to get to the borders of Donetsk and Lugansk regions, two zones of the most intensive fighting areas. And they can also dream about holding Kherson and Zaporozhye, at least at the line that they currently have. Because in order for them to accumulate enough forces to push further, it will be nearly impossible for them because Kherson area is difficult. Kherson is difficult because they will have to cross Dnieper and it's a big operation. And in Zaporozhye, they would still need to accumulate a lot more resources, which likely will take them 4 months to 6 months to get there. But they will be trying to do it. They're playing a very long war. They're preparing themselves for a protracted fight, and they increased the number of their official army up to 1 million by another 1 million. And they're also adding another tank army and more divisions. These are not questions of defense. Now, the question to us, are we ready to fight for another 3, 4, 5 years? And the question is rather simple. Which world do we want to see in 10 years in Europe? Because as military logics and strategists taught us, a war is fought for the better world. So what is the contour of this better world? What does security look like in that world? The West has not taken any fundamental decisions yet. Russia has made several decisions. One of them was Russia started this war as it is. And Russia was taking an inertia decision to help Ukraine, but we have not set any positive goals, neither us nor the West. We set some negative goals to defeat Russia, to get rid of their aggression. But what are the positive goals? One of them would be joining NATO, one can argue. And we now have society pushing it back with their hands and legs, saying that it doesn't fit the ideation to get to the borders of 1991. One can say it's a psychological desire to get back to your life before 24th of February. Christ said in these cases, let the dead bury their dead, meaning that the old ideas do not work. You don't pour new wine in the old wine barrels. And this is a refusal to win. This is treated as a lack of will to win in our society. Okay, will to win is good, but we need to understand that there is no old Europe, old NATO, or old Russia. Not, of course, old Ukraine. So the question is, what new world are we building? And for that, we need to intensify our efforts. We need to make sure that we're on the same page with our allies. If you have a calculator, let's sit down and figure out that by the 1st of July of 2024, we need to achieve certain tasks. And for that, we need to get certain resources, and then we sign it, and then we go. And the task in this case would be to basically achieve the goals that we set for this counteroffensive, and to get to the ocean, to the sea over there, to the Sea of Azov, and to cut Russian access to Crimea. You set the goals, you get the resources, and you follow that. Can anybody set this question seriously in Ukraine and on the West? Because everybody would need to be at the table. Macron, Peter Paul, Orban needs to be at the table, and we need to be convincing all of them that we can do it. This is a much harder task than it seems. The West is kind of asleep. They're not really wanting to go with us on this goal. Their discussion is about the after-war setting of world and the defense systems is very unpopular. They're smirking when they hear that, and they really don't want to discuss it. They're not ready to envision it. And look, Alexey, that thesis that the West is asleep, it actually opens the space for maneuver for Ukraine, because if the West is not devising acceptable options and scenarios, Ukraine can take initiative and start drafting what possibly could work for all of us, what could be used as a motivation in the West. And we may be wrong in some initiatives. Maybe they'll correct something and say, hey, no, we cannot do that, but we maybe can find a different path. And we'll start figuring out the negotiation position for us that would allow us to get to the main goal, to a discussion of security guarantees. Will it be from United States, from NATO? We understand without the United States, there is no NATO. So the key position for us is United States. Our lobbyists should be living there. We need to affect media campaigns and election year, because over there's a lot of debate. For example, in Republican camp, and just, when was it, a day ago, Nikki Haley in the Republican camp showed for us a very inspiring tendency. And she started telling Republicans that you cannot wiggle away from reality. You cannot just abandon Israel and Ukraine and everything will get better. No, we will have issues then. You cannot just resolve the matter of pensions in the United States and many other realistic pieces. It actually was received very well by the audience. She scored high on these debates. So we need to emphasize our efforts in this regard. We need to reach out to Nikki Haley, to the others, and to continue explaining Americans why defeat of Ukraine will lead ultimately to a pretty big catastrophe for America, maybe a bigger one since the times of Pearl Harbor, because strategically it will be of that caliber, a catastrophe for the whole Western society. So look, on the 15th of November, Biden and Xi Jinping meet in San Francisco, first time since 2017, I think. On the 14th of November, Putin has planned a big speech to his people. Do all our viewers understand what it means? They are tossing their cards. Before that, Putin visited Xi Jinping, and they are playing this triangle. Where is our spot in this triangle? Do you understand the price we've paid and we continue to pay, but we're still not at the table where these decisions are discussed? We've paid by a partially burnt house, a lot of dead, but we're still not at the table of negotiations where the contours of the new world are being designed. Our task is to be at this table, to show the benefits to European allies and American allies that we need to be at the table. We have achieved certain appreciation by the world, but we have not been included into the designer cabinet for this new world security system. We need to be at the table. And we can get there only by putting a certain question. And you also need to start looking at the situation as a team player. Right now, we are not looking as team player. We're looking as little kids who took Khrushchev's boot and hitting the pulpit with the yells, "Give us, give us." Yeah, they gave us. They'll give more. They'll continue supporting us. You will not lose. But what next? That's why in Xi Jinping administration, Biden administration, Putin administration, they were discussing how to set things up. And where are we in this story? They are probably discussing the post-war formula. Where is our voice in this story? Where are we in this post-war world? Why do we need to guess our position from the random phrases by Peter Paul, Macron, or Rasmussen? We've been playing this game, remember? We were offering a Formula 24, and we were discussing it at large, but something large was missed, and we stopped discussing it. It was a very strong step. It was a very great, inadequate idea and initiative. Now the question, why was it not accepted? And why did we not push it further? It depends upon the success on the front, I suspect. And the West outlines it again and again that we do need to be successful on the front. And we need to come back to the West and say, well, you need to aid us so we get there. And if they can't, then we need to bring them to reality as well and say, hey, if you cannot provide us a certain number of missiles and jets, then let's discuss in different terms. First, stop demanding from us successes from the front line, which we cannot achieve with the current level of provision and the supply that you're sending, and let's play some alternative politics line. You want us to do what? To continue attacking when we don't have enough efforts, enough forces to attack without your support, without your adequate support? Then let's imagine what happens if we lose. How much it will cost you? What will be the price that collective West will pay? If you cannot argument your position well from positive, let's argument from the negative. Let's calculate real consequences of Ukraine's loss. Perhaps you won't like them. They are asleep. You need to be waking and pushing to get to a serious principle discussion. And the majority is asleep indeed. And what I don't like, though, is that Putin's and Xi Jinping's administration and Biden are still playing some formula, and we're not aware, we're not part of it. I suspect that we need maybe, to hit our shoe on the pulpit, but we need to demand something else. Not F-16s. Of course, we need them, yes. We need the right to know the contours that they are drafting without us. And we need to make sure our opinion is being calculated into the formula as well. But we need to be sure, to be ready to be a team player. Biden did mention that we are part of the West, so if we are part of the West, give us an opportunity to be that, to have a voice on the collective table, because we've paid a huge price, including for all of you in the West, and we continue to pay it. This is how we should be posting this question. And the guarantees, the military cooperation, this is just part of the guarantees. But guarantees are not being built by themselves. They should be in the framework of the new world, where Ukraine will take a significant portion of, and it will be a significant portion of the East European safety. And the only doctrine that the West has, it basically is, let's go back to the 24th of February and we'll try to hold Russia further with some changes. That's not exactly an inspiration. Return to 23rd of February is rather concerning for me. And I am also concerned that Biden, Putin, and Xi Jinping administration managed to birth any new valuable idea. I suspect they're going back to the 23rd of February. And the paradox is the old world is dead and nobody is suggesting a new world. And it's all hinging by that thread until somebody suggests something new. And that new can be born only in a serious discussions, in serious battles of minds. And you need to be waking people up and saying this question, let's discuss what the new world will be, because mechanisms created after the Second World War do not work. Iran is now leading the Commission on Human Rights in the United Nations. And Russia, that violated all the international rules by all means they could, that created thousands of war crimes in the last year and a half, they're the member of Security Council of United Nations that can veto anything and everything, all the resolutions that are being signed against Russia. No Potsdam-Yalta agreements are not defending anyone from anything. They did not protect Kosovo. They did not protect Syria, Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan, Israel, Ukraine, and many other places you can name where they failed. So perhaps it's time to change the world order and guarantees and security systems, because many countries are interested in having working security system in the world. One can note that except Yugoslavia, they managed to actually hold peace for a while. But since 1989, these guarantees failed. They're not working since then, for over 40 years, 30 years. Where we need to start drawing a new map, we need to start thinking, how will defense system work? What are the new values? And unfortunately, the way we approach it is usually we just sit down and bring back the old system and see maybe it'll fit somehow. And it'll probably fail again unless we find a real solution, because it's not working. Alexey, there is another suggestion. Maybe address Macron's statement more formally and try to interpret what exactly does he mean in three aspects. First is next month, he says, will be critical for Ukraine offensive. Second, he said that if Russia would be allowed to win this war, that phrase that he used, I think you did mention that we have to be guessing, looking at their phrases and leaks of what they think. So I'm curious, what can he mean here? And the third point is Macron said, for Ukraine, it's not time yet to sit down at the negotiation table, highlighting that Kiev needs to be the one, of course, making that decision, but also added that there will be time when it will be a good time for negotiations with Russia. So, in this regard, what can you say about the time of negotiations and that Russia would not win, as he also slipped? So he did say about the month that we have to fight, for that it will be important. Somebody needed to persuade him that next month will be important. After Zaluzhny summarized that the quick and effective counteroffensive is done with, so I don't know who pressed him, who convinced him that we still need that month. I hope this is not because of Russian effort to take Avdiivka, but somebody did name that time frame for him. So technically, he did not take it from the ceiling. It's not like French intel came to Macron and said, "No, there'll be counteroffensive for another month, and then we'll see." No, it's not that. We are a little bit in action under Tokmak and over there, but they're on a very small scale, and Russia is attacking near Kupiansk and Avdiivka. So this is not our counteroffensive. Well, we are also creating certain issues for them on the left bank of Kherson, of Dnieper, but I am also not seeing that as a grandiose breakthrough. Calculator doesn't show it. Russia may be allowed to win this war if... What do you think it means? It means that there'll be not enough aid coming to Ukraine, and Russia slowly will bite piece by piece until they get to a situation when we'll have to beg for peace from a maximum unfavorable position. And I really do not like him mentioning that. One thing is when we talk about that in our streams, we do not have that responsibility. Second is when a president, one of the pillars of Europe, a president of the nuclear country in Europe, is bringing this topic, and also one of the biggest financial donors to Ukraine. France is in top 5. And that formulation, I do not like it. You know what is, in quotes, funny in this? People really do not miss what we're talking about. People do not understand what we're talking about at large in Ukraine, because overheated expectations, they're just like a blur on their eyesight, and they likely will not get it till the end of the winter. I caught myself thinking that I'm in a radical counterposition as a politician and as an analyst. As a politician, I need to be saying the right things, right? Something when I was saying at the beginning of this war, guys, iron will to victory, our heroism and etc. will never surrender, we need to push, right? To be sending such a calming and sweet message. And analyst needs to say the truth the way it is in me. And in this case, I don't want to deceive our people. Yes, of course, we are brave, we do not want to surrender, but it's a bad idea to rush your car in the wall with a scream, "I'll never surrender." We need to be smart, we need to be wise. What do we rely upon when we were promised 1 million artillery shells and could only get in reality 300,000? You need to be back to reality, looking at that. You need to be sober. Because the West is somehow on the level of rhetoric, they're jumping between "we'll never forget you, but we're getting tired of you." And on the NATO, it jumps from "let's invite you to NATO" to "maybe we'll let Russia win." They don't know themselves what they want. They have a ton of different opinions. Orban says we should not be accepted to Europe or NATO, and they are one of those countries, and they will veto our acceptance. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of Hungary will be making a speech in the next few days to EU why we should not be part of EU, by the way. And they don't have a collective position. Europe and the United States are very far apart in this matter. So when we're saying we need to talk to the West, it's a question that should be asked, whom do we talk with? Because each country has a difference of opinion, and none of them has a capability to solve this conflict by itself, public opinion and the results, except for the United States. But they are not going to do that because they don't have a global answer where the whole story is going. So, yes, we do have Cossack drive and bravery. I'm actually the one who coined this term, I think, but we need to start being logical. Let me, Alexey, also talk about Macron here. I think Macron is in his logic. He is In his framework, somebody might have said that indeed there'll be some time until December that there may some changes happen on the front. That's why I think he brought up that month. France wants the war to be over faster because France has its own views on Ukraine as a possible ally for France's presence in Africa, because they understand that Russia is just taking them out there, all the topplings in Niger and some other places. It creates a platform to kick France out of Africa, and in a year and a half, may find itself without the nuclear component that they were mining in Africa, that they were getting from those territories in Africa. And for France, the end of war is definitely desirable because they can then use Ukraine as an ally to reform their presence in Africa, together with Americans, because they're also understanding that in Africa, Russia and China are really kicking the West out. So Macron is, as representative of the Western political class, he is trying to bring us to understanding that we need to start to communicate on the language of strategic and tactical logic as a team player, and we're getting this message. We need to start getting the ball from them, and we need to be playing that more flexible position that they could explain to their voters, to their political reality where they are. And in order for them to have this chance, we need to be smarter than they are, basically. We need to be not just standing here and saying that borders of 91 in our Ukrainian language, and that's the only thing. Then they'll say, no, sorry, we have issues. Credit Suisse has another economic situation, or in Italy something is drawing us back. We cannot. Russian pranksters actually caught the head of Italy, and yeah, she did spill that the in reality situation is that they need to somehow get out of this war. So yeah, you can get out of this war, but you, in the meantime, still need to grow the stakes higher to defend your interests. Because what Rasmussen is saying, I'll bring us back to his statement, he is saying what we were saying on our streams with Alexey times and times again. He did remember that story between German Democratic Republic and the Federative Germany Federation. So East and West Germany. When NATO joined Germany, NATO was only covering the western part of Germany. So the fact that Germany was divided and still had separation and two territories, it did not stop it. And then when finally the wall fell, the Germany as a whole became part of NATO, which actually seemed impossible back in the 50s, in the middle of 20th century. But Rasmussen is highlighting that this is a working tool, this is a working approach that needs to be brought to discussion in press and different publications to incite this conversation. We need to be also the active party bringing this up. And we should not be just screaming, like Podolyak said recently, Macron, stop saying making idiotic statements. And Macron is not making idiotic statements. He is actually telling us the logic, the way it looks from the interests of his country. And if we will not be part of that logic, if we will not reflect it in our message, if we will not weave our logic together with theirs, we will be finding ourselves as a destructive element and will not be a team player for the Western team that Alexey is talking about. So look, transferring it to the analogy of your family. Imagine one gentleman comes to another and says, I need some help. Can you give me a vehicle and money? And the other guy is saying, you know, I have some nuance in my family. I could probably do that, but I need your help here and here. And I'll need to maneuver over here. That's an iffy situation. And the guy who is asking for resources is saying, I don't give a damn about your family situation. Just give me your money, your car, and your clothes and motorbike. So, yeah, I think that's exactly how it works. All right, gentlemen, at least one signal from Ukraine about being ready for different kinds of compromise is being voiced. Alexey Danilov, whom we mentioned a lot of times as the head of Security Council of Ukraine, he recently said that Ukraine is ready to discuss the compromise to become a member of the European Union. He was commenting the statement by President Orban of Hungary about blocking Ukraine's participation until Hungarian demands on education and language will be met. So in regards to Orban, Danilov says, and our Vice Premier Stefanishin, who is in charge of this matter, we are ready to follow with certain compromise to achieve better agreement. There is nothing impossible here. And moreover, we want Hungary to have no cards left to attack Ukraine. And we can say that this framework is well known for a while. Why finally now we're seeing some, I would say, officials from Kiev are commenting that, and why Danilov is the one who is commenting on this, not Prime Minister, not President. What do you think? Why is it exactly Danilov? Let them figure it out in the power. Why did they appoint him, or why did he take this role on his own? But I want to say that he's probably gone worn out by these roller coasters, because you can stay in one emotional pose for a while, but when situation changes so much, you need to change your pose. So all the commissions, European commissions, other resources came out and said so many times that this is still a matter that needs addressing. I guess finally they succeeded in pressing this matter. Probably they stopped talking in recommendation mode from Europe. They probably started using ultimatums. And that's probably leading to a CR2 meeting with the head of foreign affairs of Hungary with EU, where he'll be telling EU why Ukraine should not be accepted. So I think this could be leading a prelude by Ukraine to that speech. So this is one of the instruments they bring us back to reality from our superinflated position of pathos, right? Yeah, we understand. Okay. So back to European diplomacy. You did mention this fact, but let's get in more details. Borrell called, and he's the head of European diplomacy. He appealed EU to send more money to Ukraine. He thinks that European countries need to compensate for probable shrinking of aid from United States that may dwindle this coming year. And do you think they'll have enough resources to compensate for that? Well, I'll remind you that Greece at some point got 180 billion to overcome their financial crisis. And I think overall they got over 300 billion. They have potential. They just don't understand what is the money needed for. Proportions of arms and financial aid depend upon the level of, and they're very proportional to the level of understanding. What are you spending it for? If you give them more reasons to help, the help itself will grow. The thing is to give these reasons, because if your reasons are for 60 billion, they'll give you 60. If you give them reasons for 300 billion, they'll be 300 billion or 500 billion if your reasons are strong enough, worthy of that. So the West, just to understand how it works, when some producer of energy, some company to support its sector, when they needed to, they gave $90 billion just to support one company, when they see logic, when they see the effects and they have the plan. And we're getting only as much as they can see the reason for. My friends, the world has a lot of money. Americans, for 106 billion that they're discussing between Ukraine and Israel, is about nothing. It's a small amount for them. If they had a firm understanding, remember how much they spent on Afghanistan when they thought why? When they thought they understood why and what's happening there? They're giving only as much as there is a meaning in the situation. So we need to be fighting for the upper framework, for the meaning of this war. How do you see this world? What is the place of Ukraine? What are your global interests? How do we tie them together with interests of Europe and individual countries? Let us play our role in this, and we have something to offer. right? Let's do it. If they're investing 100 billion, then to defend them, they'll spend 300 billion if need be, because it's long-term investments. But we need to offer them a right system, a right rationale. And the main thing is that old joke, when you're investigating the issues, just make sure you don't find yourself at the end of the trouble or the source of it. So leading them together, given that there is a big disconnect between different countries, can only be done by a very strong suggestion from our side, and we don't have it. The West doesn't have new ideas. We supposedly should be suggesting them to have some guarantees of security at the end, because we're a definite stakeholder in that. And the so-called importance of meanings is very characteristic for us and the West in this conflict. We're fighting for 2 years and nobody can formulate a new meaning. In this regard, the meanings that would inspire would definitely help the situation. Because let's be blunt here and frank, you can never return to the 23rd of February, ever. And the contours of New World, nobody can write them and discuss them out at large, and they're not even written out. All right, the last news for today. I think it's important to understand the geopolitics of the moment. Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, met the president of Iran, and the question, Moscow and Kremlin propaganda started turning this communication into Saudi Arabia demonstrating their dislike for the West and turn towards alliance with Iran and China and Russia, of course. How do you think we should treat that meeting? And, well, Saudi Arabia is in a very specific situation right now. They really do not like Democrats because they are the ones pointing them for the human rights. They more or less communicate with Republicans. And demonstratively, every time Democrats come to power in the United States, they cool off their relations. And one of the serious issues is juxtaposition of Saudi Arabia and Iran. Saudi Arabia tried to fight for some goals in Yemen, and they failed militarily, and they had enough damage from Yemen and Iran, which actually attacked some of their oil producing capacity with drone attacks and the like. And they took some measures to strike peace with Iran. And he is bin Salman, you can call him, I don't know, Peter the Great or any other great reformer whom to compare him with. He wants to revolutionize Saudi Arabia and bring it to the new technological level. He tried to lean on Israel, and that's why there was an agreement being prepared for Israel, and agreement with Iran was a backup, and agreement with Israel was destroyed by the 7th of October events, and they're now looking at maybe using Iran as another component. So they're going after their national interests, and they're discussing it with different points of power in the area. Now, here's another thing. Iran invited Belarusian soldiers for military exercise. This is really forming the axis of evil. Iran, Syria, Russia, China, North Korea. We might even have to add Belarus to that, but I do believe in Alexander Grigorievich, the dictator of Belarus. He might still maneuver around. Do you think Saudi Arabia may join this axis? No, they will not go for that, never. But they will be looking for their own interests and defending them by any means they can find. All right, summing it up, people, we are all at the phase of loss, both us and the West. Nobody can come up with a new framework for the new world that would be better than pre-war. This is the main weakness. It's not the lack of money, lack of support, it's lack of meanings of all this fight. And China and Russia are giving their own meanings, by the way. There are pseudo-meanings, they're not real. Not many people believe them, and they cannot stand the test of time, but they're still coming up with them. And we will be fluttering until we find a way to devise these new meanings. And this is our task, to continue pushing them, pushing the politicians and think tanks and society at large to come up with new meanings. Once these things will be formulated and accepted, things will change. They'll find money, they'll find volunteers, they'll find weapons, anything. International brigade, if need be, jets will be coming over. The moment you find what for. Until there is a meaning discovered, it'll be just what's left over in terms of support. Yeah, let's give it to Ukraine. Accepted. Okay, gentlemen, thank you for today's stream. Did we gather enough money? We almost closed it. There is about 30,000 hryvnias left. Out of 230, we already gathered 200,000, so 30 left. Guys, yeah, one more word about it. It's important. We are putting the link at the bottom. I'm putting it to the chat, and Alexey also gets that message there. So those who are watching us, please help our guys to get the funds for that equipment. And I want to congratulate the people of Poland with the Day of Independence. So our Polish brothers, congratulations with this important holiday. Yep, my post on that. And our best wishes to you on this. You already are succeeding. Poland is definitely an example for us in Ukraine how the country can be developed when you have a long will and you have a system and systemic understanding of the process in the world and what do you want to achieve, despite of all the inner squabbles they also have, just like we do. Despite that, Poland made a huge stride, and I think they'll still remain our ally and will exert the maximum of our effort to make sure that our relations reach such a level of strategic depth that we never had before. And these two countries, Ukraine and Poland, as allies, would be doing things that we cannot do separately. So Poles were definitely sincerely with you. Speaking of Poland, by the way, their situation, for those who are familiar with it, they fight internally and bicker internally just as much as we do. But they have a global agreement for a strategic vector. If you study the history of how Poland was joining EU and NATO, they were hindered by many countries. Against us, we only have Orban. Against Poland, there were 10 members of those countries, of those organizations, and they were in court with them. And they still pressured their line because they had the long strategic goals set and they were following them. And you do not argue on those strategic things. They argue on a lot of other things internally, but the strategic goals are set. This is a good example for us. Happy Independence Day, Poland, once again. And everybody, a quiet night. Goodbye.